All right, picture it. It's the spring of 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill is dominating the news, the Affordable Care Act is making headlines, and the absolute cinematic masterpiece that is Hot Tub Time Machine is hitting theaters. Now, plenty of things from this era are completely etched into our collective memory. But today, we're going to look at one thing Microsoft desperately hopes you have entirely forgotten about. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are performing a full autopsy on a device that is quite possibly the worst cell phone ever brought to market. I'm talking about the Microsoft Kin.
Look at that number for a second. That is a 1 with 9 zeros. Microsoft pumped a staggering $1 billion into developing this single device, just an astronomical investment of time, talent, and resources, all meant to completely revolutionize how younger demographics interacted with mobile tech. And, with $1 billion on the line, you'd expect a polished, world-changing piece of hardware, right? Well, not exactly.
Because despite that massive, record-breaking investment, the device barely even saw the light of day. A mere 48 days after the Kin was released to the public, Microsoft completely panicked. They yanked the phone right off store shelves and essentially pretended the entire launch was just a bad dream. 48 days! Literally, the milk in your fridge right now has a longer shelf life than Microsoft's billion-dollar baby.
And the reason they had to pull the plug so fast comes down to this absolutely shocking reported sales number. The public responded to this thing with a level of apathy usually reserved for clicking "I agree" on software terms and conditions. While some reports generously suggest they sold maybe under 10,000 units, other sources claim the actual number of devices purchased by real human beings was as unbelievably low as 503 units, total.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our official autopsy report. We're going to be examining 4 specific causes of death for this massive flop: the fake smartphone target, the neighborhood gossip tech, a masterclass in missing features, and finally, the Verizon price trap.
So, cause of death number 1, the fake smartphone target.
To understand how things went so disastrously wrong, we have to look at the market gap Microsoft was actually trying to fill here. See, back in 2010, regular cell phones were everywhere, but actual smartphones? Those were still considered luxury items. So Microsoft had what they thought was this big-brained idea. They'd target a younger, social media-loving teen crowd with a lower-priced device that wasn't actually a full smartphone, but kind of felt like one. The centerpiece of this whole grand illusion was something called the Kin Loop. This was basically a continuous chronological feed right on your home screen that merged your texts, calls, and posts from Facebook, Twitter, and, wait for it, MySpace. This feed was mirrored on a companion website called Kin Studio. It was a clever parlor trick, right? It was meant to put your phone on the internet, effectively hiding the fact that the device in your hand wasn't actually all that smart to begin with.
Moving on to cause of death number 2, the neighborhood gossip tech.
Now, that illusion of a smart device shatters pretty quickly when we look under the hood at the cloud syncing architecture they built to support it. This was their first truly fatal flaw. The Kin didn't actually connect directly to Facebook or Twitter. Instead, it only connected to Kin Studio, which did all the heavy lifting of pulling your social data. So think of Kin Studio as the neighborhood gossip who goes around learning everyone's business. Your Kin phone was just the spot where you met up with that gossip to get the juicy details. The massive problem here? Your phone only met up with the gossip every 15 minutes or when you manually forced it to. So your supposedly real-time social media feed was literally always a quarter of an hour behind.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the staggering contrast between what users expected and what they actually got. Because of this bizarre roundabout sync method, the social clients were just mega busted. On the Kin's version of Facebook, you were restricted to posting status updates. That was it. No liking your friends' posts, no commenting on pictures, and sadly, no poking. You were basically just shouting into a void on a platform that was entirely designed for interaction.
And somehow, amazingly, Twitter was even worse. If you're a teen trying to tweet from your Kin, you couldn't reply to anyone, you couldn't use the search function, and you absolutely could not post photos. I mean, for a phone whose entire marketing identity was built on being deeply intrinsically social, the core functionality was just staggeringly limited.
Let's move to our next autopsy finding, cause of death number 3, a masterclass in missing features.
Let's see how all this builds into an absolute disaster, and look at what else Microsoft completely forgot to include for actual human beings living in the year 2010. Prepare to be a little overwhelmed here. The Microsoft Kin had no app store. It had no calendar, no calculator, no maps, and, maybe most tragically for a phone aimed specifically at teenagers, it had absolutely zero games. Furthermore, Microsoft made the incredibly bold choice to permanently lock the phone into Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace, with literally no way to add new apps. Just to put that into perspective for a second, Instagram launched a mere 6 months after the Kin, meaning this device was instantly and permanently obsolete the very second it hit the shelf.
So, as you can imagine, the critical reception was exactly what you would expect. One reviewer famously described the Kin as being practically raw in the middle. Honestly, though, we find that comparison a bit unfair, because a raw cookie is delicious, whereas the Kin just left an incredibly bad taste in everyone's mouth. You really have to wonder how a tech giant makes these kinds of mistakes. Well, it all comes down to some incredibly weird internal politics. See, prior to this, Microsoft actually spent $500 million acquiring a company called Danger. These were the brilliant minds behind the iconic T-Mobile Sidekick. But instead of using that world-class talent to build the Kin, Microsoft's internal divisions essentially just ignored Danger's expertise. They decided to build a completely bespoke operating system from scratch. This took forever, cost an absolute fortune, and resulted in a slow, disjointed mess.
And that brings us to the final and easily most devastating cause of death in this report, the Verizon price trap.
Let's pose a very logical question here. The hardware itself wasn't terribly expensive to buy up front. The phone was priced relatively cheaply, sitting right between $150 and $200 at the register. So if the target demographic was cash-strapped teens looking for a cool social device, why didn't they just snatch it up at that price point?
Well, here is the fatal blow. Buying that cheap hardware locked you into a mandatory 2-year Verizon data plan. And that plan? It costs at least $70 every single month. Think about the logic there for a second. They made this half-baked, non-smartphone cost more to own on a monthly basis than an actual, fully featured Apple iPhone. Any rational teenager who somehow had the budget to afford a $70 monthly cell phone bill would, simply go out and buy an iPhone. And if teens were relying on their parents to foot that massive Verizon bill, yeah, Microsoft did themselves absolutely no favors with their marketing campaign. In what has to be one of the most baffling advertising choices ever made, their TV spots literally featured a teenage boy taking an up-the-shirt photograph of his own chest to send to a girl. As you can probably guess, those commercials didn't exactly have parents clamoring to rush to the Verizon store to sign a 2-year $70 a month contract for their kids.
Which leads us to the aftermath. A legendary paperweight.
So, where does that actually leave us? Let's summarize the enduring legacy of this catastrophic hardware launch. The crucial point is this. The Microsoft Kin didn't just fail. It achieved a level of failure so spectacular that it actually became a museum exhibit. Today, the Kin is quite literally a legendary paperweight that physically tours the world in the official Museum of Failure, taking its rightful resting place among history's greatest commercial flops. If there is one core lesson to take away from this entire billion-dollar disaster, it is this clearly defined truth. The Microsoft Kin remains a permanent testament to what happens when a company spends unimaginable wealth trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist, while completely ignoring the practical problems that actually do.
And honestly, it leaves us with a fascinating, almost unbelievable reality to ponder. When the biggest tech giants in the world have $1 billion, half a decade of development time, and top-tier talent at their complete disposal, how do they still completely forget to ask what the user actually wants? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this autopsy gave you some valuable insights into that incredibly fine line between tech innovation and total tech disaster. Catch you next time.